Believe it or not, this restaurant is ours and it's meant for my oldest son and his wife. If you don't like it, then get a divorce.
Yelled my husband in a fit of rage. Following him, my husband's brother, now called Mike, made his arrogant claim.
I'm part of this family too, you know. Surely I deserve some part in the restaurant.
Not to be left out, Mike's wife Karen also berated me. You don't deserve to run such a fine establishment. Get out already. I felt a surge of anger within me. I couldn't care less about what happened to these people. I decided there and then to put them in their place once and for all. The first order of business to correct their misguided notions. I can't help but smirk at the thought of the look on their faces when they find out the truth. My name is Natalie Farrell. At 35, I'm running a sushi restaurant. I have many regular customers and thankfully the business is doing well. The shop was originally started by my grandparents. Both of my parents passed away from illness when I was young, so my grandparents became my guardians. As I helped out in the shop, I became interested in becoming a sushi chef and taking over the shop. After graduating from the culinary school, I started working in the restaurant immediately. I learned how to make sushi from my grandfather and how to serve customers from my grandmother. Thanks to their guidance, I became a competent chef and developed proper etiquette. For a while, the three of us ran the shop. But when I turned 23, a man named Steve Farrell came to our shop. He was 5 years older than me. He used to be a sushi chef, but the shop he had been working at had closed down, so he was looking for a new job. My grandparents were considering retirement due to their old age. They had mentioned that they wanted one more employee, so we decided to hire him. His skills were undeniable, and he quickly became a valuable asset. I learned a lot from him, and we eventually grew close and got married when I was 25. My grandparents thought Steve was a reliable and honest man and they felt secure with him. Our married life went well, and after my grandparents retired, we continued to run the shop together, supporting each other. However, when I was 31, my grandmother passed away from an illness. The following year, my grandfather also passed away. Since then, my husband's attitude started to change gradually. When I was in the kitchen, he would become grumpy and started saying things like,
You should focus on serving the customers. I want to hone my sushi making skills, so I want to be in the kitchen as much as possible.
Since he was so passionate about sushi, I understood and began to take over more of the serving duties. However, the real reason behind my husband's change of attitude was something different. About half a year later, I overheard him saying something on the phone.
Natalie is a woman, right? I don't like the fact that she's a sushi chef.
I was very sad. I was shocked to learn that my loving husband thought this way about me. Sushi is a traditional dish and there is a strong tradition of male dominance in this field. Therefore, the number of female sushi chefs is low. However, this attitude is starting to change and there are more restaurants accepting female chefs. And I believe I am able to provide sushi that satisfies our customers. I wish he wouldn't dislike me just because I'm a woman. After hanging up the phone, my husband finally noticed my presence and hastily tried to gloss over his comments.
I was just stressed out and said it without thinking. I promise I won't say it again. Will you forgive me?
Seeing him seemingly regretful, I decided to forgive him. However, my husband started causing more problems. One day, I noticed that $3,000 had been withdrawn from our savings account. When I confronted him, he said,
My brother Mike lost his job and I had to help him out. He's family after all. There's nothing we can do.
Frankly, I didn't like it. The reason being, Mike is a problematic person. He initially aimed to be a chef, but quit early due to the rigorous training and has been job hopping ever since. Every time we met, he would ask for money, and he gave off a very irresponsible impression. His wife Karen also can't hold a job. Despite this, she always had an aggressive attitude towards me, saying things like, "You must be so tired from working all the time. I'm a housewife, so I enjoy my free life." I wondered if there was any need to support these people with hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're adults and they're healthy. I wish they could figure it out for themselves. Our restaurant was profitable, but our savings were steadily decreasing. At first, when I pointed out to him that he was giving too much, he seemed to reflect on his behavior and said, "Sorry." But later on he said,
Natalie, you're the one managing our savings and household budget, right? You should just manage it better.
and refused to listen to my advice. The situation with my husband was getting worse, and I was starting to worry seriously about our future savings. I briefly considered divorce, but eventually decided against it. Steve is an excellent craftsman, and without him, our restaurant would suffer. Besides, Steve has always been a responsible person. I clung to this thin hope that he would pull himself together someday. Later, I would realize how naive this thought was. Years have passed since my grandparents passed away, and we arrive at the present day. At this point, an event occurred that I could no longer tolerate. On our restaurant's day off, while I was doing the laundry at home, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Mike and Karen.
Hey, from today on, I can eat sushi every day now, right? Lucky me.
Their words made no sense. As I was at a loss, Steve appeared and I demanded an explanation. Casually, he said,
They will be living with us for a while from today on.
I was even more confused. Upon further inquiry, I learned that Mike and Karen were in dire financial straits and couldn't even afford their apartment rent. Upon learning this, Steve had taken it upon himself to allow them to stay with us for a while. What's more, neither Mike nor Karen were working, so we were expected to cover their living expenses as well. I told Steve, "Don't make decisions like that without discussing with me first." But he shrugged it off, saying,
They're our family, so it doesn't matter.
and so their cohabitation began forcibly. Needless to say, my stress levels skyrocketed. Not only this, but Steve took Mike and Karen to our restaurant and allowed them to eat expensive sushi for free. They ate up sushi without a care in the world, chattering and making noise. Steve even announced in front of our other customers,
I'll treat my brother and Karen.
even our regular customers seemed to find this odd. One of our regulars, a man named Tucker, frowned and warned Steve.
Steve, it's not right to let them eat for free just because they're your family. It will affect the restaurant's business, won't it?
Steve pretended to reflect upon his words, saying,
I'm sorry.
Tucker is our regular customer, and we have been close since I was a child. He's like a beloved grandfather to me, and he's always there for me, saying,
If you ever have a hard time, feel free to talk to me.
However, despite Tucker's warning, Steve didn't stop giving preferential treatment to Mike and Karen. Steve never scolded Mike and always showed a soft smile towards Karen. Watching Steve like this, a suspicion began to form in my mind. I hope I was just misunderstanding, but my suspicion would later prove correct. When my stress was at its breaking point, a major incident occurred. One day off, Steve, Mike, and Karen told me they had important news.
Actually, we have decided to hand over our restaurant to Mike and Karen. It's been Mike's dream to become a chef, and we thought it would be a good idea.
I felt dizzy. Running a restaurant is tough. I couldn't believe that Mike and Karen could manage it, and I didn't want to give the restaurant that we inherited from our grandparents to people like them. I firmly told them. Then Steve, Mike, and Karen all became furious. Steve yelled at me loudly.
That's my restaurant. What I do with it is my business. Whether you like it or not, the restaurant will belong to Mike and Karen. If you don't like it, get a divorce.
Mike also arrogantly said,
I'm part of the family too, right? Just give me the restaurant.
Karen berated me, saying, "You're not worthy of that restaurant. Get out quickly." I was filled with intense anger. I no longer cared what happened to these people. I decided to retaliate against them once and for all. First, I decided to correct the three's misunderstanding. I chuckled to myself, wondering what their faces would look like once they learned the truth. I don't know what you guys are misunderstanding, but the restaurant is something I inherited from my grandparents. It's in my name, so I can't transfer it to Steve, Mike, or Karen. As I explained this, my husband looked surprised.
But I'm your husband. I should have the right to do as I please with the restaurant.
Inheritances go to blood relatives. Since we don't have children, my inheritance is mine alone. Steve finally seemed to understand the mechanics of inheritance and was stunned. I was almost dumbfounded by his lack of common sense because Steve was so dedicated to sushi he lacked some common knowledge. I have often felt this way in our married life. Then, Mike started to make a fuss.
Hey, you should have explained this beforehand.
I finally raised my voice in anger. What? You guys were the ones who proceeded with the conversation based on your misunderstandings. You didn't even give me the time to explain. What are you saying? Annoyingly, Mike tried to counter further.
But we don't care about whose name it's in. We can run the restaurant on our own. You're no longer needed, so get out.
I really decided to leave if I stayed here any longer. I thought I might explode with anger. I packed only the essentials, said goodbye, and stormed out of the house. After leaving the house, I initially stayed in a cheap business hotel. There, I strategized about what to do next. I had no desire to make amends with Steve. I had finally realized that the kind Steve was nowhere to be found. I don't know if that was his true nature or if something had twisted his personality. But suddenly, I felt foolish for trusting such a horrible man. I wanted to punish him. I also wanted Mike and Karen to leave my house. I wondered how I could drive them out. After thinking about it, I made various calls and formally launched a revenge plan. I also went out for a bit, and after about a week, my preparations were complete. So I returned home. Seeing me, Steve and the couple looked triumphant. Steve smirked and looked at me.
Hey, finally reflecting and came back, huh? But returning in just a week, you lack resolve.
Hearing this, the couple laughed heartily. Suppressing my anger, I showed them several photos. They were stunned at that moment, but Steve and Karen's faces turned pale. Meanwhile, Mike asked in confusion,
What are these photos?
These are photos proving Steve and Karen's affair, I declared in a cold tone. The photos showed Steve and Karen walking arm in arm, appearing to enjoy themselves. The other photos also captured their intimate moments. Mike finally seemed to understand the situation and began to blush in anger.
Hey, what is this? You have betrayed me with an affair?
Mike's anger was fierce. However, Steve didn't apologize but instead doubled down.
Shut up. It can't be helped. I fell in love. You were wandering around outside and I happened to go out with Karen.
Karen also began making pitiful excuses. It's your fault for not working. Compared to that, Steve is a respectable artisan. It's clear who I would choose. Karen hasn't been working either, and Steve, who's having an affair, is not someone trustworthy at all. I was beyond angry and more disgusted. The three of them had started a low-level argument and it seemed like it was spiraling out of control. Somehow, I managed to calm them down despite the frustration bubbling within me. Once he had calmed down a bit, my husband glared at me.
How did you get these photos? You've been following us?
No, I replied. I hired a detective to gather evidence of your affair. That's how I got these pictures. So that's why I had been visiting a detective agency. My husband ranted.
Hiring a detective is coward.
But the real coward was my adulterous husband. Well, it's unlikely he would understand that. Then Mike asked a question.
How did you realize my brother was having an affair? You must have suspected something to hire a detective.
I let out a chuckle. Of course, I could tell we are married after all. I noticed right away how excessively sweet he was acting around Karen. The smile he had for her was completely different from the one he showed me or our customers. My husband was speechless. He must have thought he wouldn't get caught. In his shock, he revealed too much in front of my grandparents. How he had acted as innocent as a cat, how he had married me for my shop, how he didn't really love me, and so on. I looked at him coldly, my heart aching. Despite loving you so much, I was betrayed by you. I have endured a lot of pain. Do you understand how much I have suffered? Can you imagine how much you have made me worry? At my harsh words, my husband finally fell silent. He looked remorseful, but I had no intention of forgiving him. Steve and Karen were silent too, probably feeling awkward. Finally, there was some quiet, and I continued, I will be claiming damages from both Karen and Steve. Be prepared. At these words, Karen erupted, Wait, I have no money. How can you claim damages from someone like me? I cut off Karen's words. All you have to do is work and earn money. You can pay in installments. It's inconceivable to hurt someone and not make amends. Karen, looking shocked, could only manage a weak, okay, and then fell silent again. I took out the divorce papers I had already filled out and made my husband fill in the necessary parts. All I have to do now is submit these to the office, and I can say goodbye to the bothersome man. The matter of the affair was now more or less settled. However, there was still something left to be done by the three of them. I asked them, You didn't just cause me trouble, did you? The three of them looked clueless. They really didn't seem to understand, so I reluctantly explained, You treated the customers of our shop poorly, right? I have been in regular contact with our regulars over the past week, and they all voiced their complaints. The main complaints were that despite the many mistakes, they never apologized, and they loudly insulted customers in the staff-only area. There was even a claim that Mike tried to steal change. When I told them about these complaints, their faces turned pale. Since you have caused so much trouble for our valued customers, I will have you apologize. I'm going to call our regulars now and have you apologize. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I briefly explained the situation, and then my husband, Mike, and Karen apologized in that order. We repeated this process several times. All of our regulars were understandably angry at the three, so the apology took much longer than expected. I knew Tucker's address, so I had them go and apologize to him directly. When Tucker saw the three, he raised his voice. You were absolutely terrible. How dare you face people with that attitude? No matter how delicious your sushis are, I will never have them again. Then he looked at me and smiled kindly. Natalie, you should cut ties with these people. Even if Steve leaves, a more skilled artisan will come to your place. Yes, I am divorcing my husband too. Thank you for all your help. I'm truly grateful. Before carrying out this plan, I had also sought advice from Tucker, which had proven immensely helpful. I thanked him deeply. After leaving Tucker's house, I made sure to let Mike, Steve, and Karen know that I had reported all their misdeeds, including their infidelity, to our regulars. You three might want to continue working as chefs, but I don't think our regulars will be visiting your restaurants. If they tell others, those people probably won't either, I said, adding insult to injury. Even if the three didn't run a restaurant, the mental damage of their embarrassment being known to so many people would be significant. I told them to pack their things and get out immediately, which they did. After they were kicked out, they seemed to get into a heated argument about what to do next. They were making such a commotion in the street that the police were called and they were taken away. They were trouble to the end. The three didn't end up with criminal records, but they did split up and started living separately. Mike and Karen got divorced too. I submitted the divorce papers to the government office and cleanly cut ties with my husband. Mike is still unemployed and living a poor life. I heard he's struggling daily to dodge debt collectors because of the substantial debt he owes. As I promised, I demanded alimony from my husband and Karen. Karen seems to have found a job for now. However, she was unemployed for a long time, so she can't suddenly become a high earner, and her salary seems to be quite low compared to her peers. My husband also managed to find a job and relocated to a remote state where he didn't know anyone. Yet rumors have a way of leaking out, and their past wrongdoings became known, leaving them with no place to hide. In particular, my husband and Karen have to keep working to pay their debts. I imagine their days are tougher than they expected. I hope they suffer. Even after my husband left, the restaurant is doing well. My regulars who learned about the incident started coming to the restaurant more frequently to support me. I had fewer chances to be in the kitchen due to my husband, but I have been practicing in secret so my skills haven't deteriorated. The enjoyable days have returned and I'm living a fulfilling life. We have also gained a new employee. She's a girl who just graduated from vocational school. She's still an apprentice and has a lot to learn, but I sense a flair in her. Her attitude towards the customers is excellent, so she is well regarded among the regulars. Since we're both women, we found it easier to connect with each other, and she sometimes confides in me about her worries. I think we're building a good relationship. I even consider having her inherit the restaurant in the future, but I intend to keep doing my best as an active chef for now. While cherishing this restaurant that I inherited from my grandparents, I wanted to keep growing both as a sushi chef and as an individual.
This isn't a place for a bottom-of-the-barrel person like you. Get lost. The moment these words, the finale of flurry of verbal abuse, were hurled at me by our new recruit, Rachel, something inside of me snapped. Still smiling, I gestured with my hand. Look over here. My name is Sherry. I'm 65 years old. I had initially worked for this company, took a break due to marriage and raising children, and have since returned to a part-time administrative role. I have a deep personal attachment to this company. After all, I've been working here since graduating middle school. Back in the day, it was a small-scale company with just a few dozen people. Reflecting back, when my father passed away suddenly, I gave up on going to high school and started working to support my mother and young siblings. I thought to myself, my life is so miserable. Now I realize I was wrong. Life is full of surprises. I believe that it's because of the hardships I've faced that I can enjoy my fulfilling daily life now. And that's how I had come to think. Oh, this document. As I was doing my usual work, my eyes fell on my document tray. The document on top was oddly colorful, decorated with mysterious illustrations. Apart from the necessary charts and graphs, there were various other problems, but in any case, it was formatted differently than the company set standard. When I asked around about who had left it there, it turned out it was a new employee, Rachel, who had left it during my absence. Holding the problematic document, I headed towards Rachel's desk. Rachel? Hi there. Can I talk to you for a moment? When I called out to her, Rachel turned her eyes towards me without responding. Her haughty attitude was perplexing, but I handed her the document. This document, did you perhaps leave it on my desk by mistake? I think it should have been submitted to your boss. Also, the format seems to be off. You might want to correct it. As I was speaking, Rachel silently stood up and beckoned me to a corner. Although I was puzzled, I followed her, only for Rachel to glare at me. Of course I submitted it to my boss, but I was told to redo it, which is super annoying. So I delegated the task to you. Can't you see this? Rachel pointed to a post-it note stuck to the document. It said, "Redo it for me." I had noticed the post-it note long ago, but I didn't understand the memo. I'm highly educated and capable, so even if I don't say anything, work comes my way and I get busy. Do you get it? That's why I decided to share some work with a part-time grandma who seems to have time. I did my best to suppress a cringe that threatened to twist my face. If I remember correctly, new recruits at this time of the year are still under their training period. Even if they're promising, would they really be assigned that much work as newcomers? Besides, what does she mean by sharing? Apart from the document, this person, Rachel, seems to have many points to question. This is your work, Rachel. I can't do it for you. As I handed the document back to her with a smile, Rachel's face turned red. Why not? It's just a little correction. Correcting it is also part of your job and learning process. Even after I explained this, Rachel didn't seem convinced. Don't be so cheeky for a part-timer, do it. At first, Rachel spoke in a low voice, but her volume gradually increased, causing a stir around us. What are you doing? Eventually, the employee in charge of her training came over and reprimanded her, ending the matter there. Or so I thought. It turned out that I was the only one who thought so, as I seemed to have earned Rachel's resentment over the document issue. From then on, I was harassed by Rachel almost every day.
It's unthinkable for someone as highly educated as me to be doing such menial work.
She would push work onto me with bizarre confidence and pride, or make snide comments about my age and part-time status, like,
"It's a blessing for a 65-year-old to be a part-timer in a big company like ours. It's hilarious how kind our company is to hire such an incapable old lady."
Rachel has been so terrible. When I discreetly asked around, it seems that Rachel is a problematic new recruit who stands out among those who joined this year. There are rumors about her poor ability to catch up on work and her difficult personality. How did someone like Rachel get hired in the first place? Rachel always flaunted her high education as if it were a mantra. I guess they equated educational background with competency. Our company assigns new employees to their departments based on their work ethic during the training phase. Most of the new hires work on my floor, so I naturally end up dealing with Rachel a lot during this period. The assessment phase lasts a month, so I only have to endure this for another 2 weeks. Oh, but what if she gets assigned to the same department as me? The dreadful thought made me inadvertently clutch my head. Despite her supervisor and other colleagues cautioning her, Rachel kept instigating confrontations with me. If we ended up in the same department, I would definitely be living in hell. She probably sees me as an easy target since she perceives me as a timid old lady. Unaware of my troubles, Rachel approached me again today.
"Hey, what was that about just now?"
She called out to me as I stepped out of the employee cafeteria. Huh? What? As I stared blankly at her, she dragged me away to a less crowded spot. Rachel turned to face me and blurted out,
"You were talking to Ethan, weren't you?"
I had indeed been chatting with a young male employee named Ethan in the cafeteria just now. I sighed inwardly. When someone complains to the mention of a person of the opposite sex, it's usually for a predictable reason. What's the matter with that?
"Don't you dare make eyes at Ethan, you old hag. The way you touch him is disgusting."
Indeed, while chatting casually, I had lightly patted his back, telling him to pull himself together. I was surprised she had noticed such a minute detail, but I was even more taken aback by her saying, "Are you serious about me hitting on him?" I couldn't help but chuckle. After all, I'm already 65, which Rachel likes to point out herself.
"What are you laughing at? Are you making fun of me? Ethan, you know, is the heir to this company, not someone a hag like you can casually talk to."
I must have inadvertently revealed my inner disbelief. Ethan is indeed popular among the female employees because of his good looks and personality. Our company has banned the custom of giving candy on Valentine's now, but I remember him taking home quite a lot of them in the past. Rachel is likely one of the many who admire, or maybe even have a crush on him. But it's absurd for her to be jealous of someone like me. Hey, enough already. A few of the younger employees who had noticed Rachel's loud voice gathered around us trying to intervene.
"Mind your own business,"
she retorted, refusing to listen. To prevent them from incurring her wrath as I had, I smiled at the people around us and reassured them. "I'm okay." Rachel spat out a final insult.
"A poor middle school graduate like you should just work quietly until you die. You're an eyesore."
And then she quickly walked away. She really is the troublemaker everyone says she is. Sherry, are you okay? The employees who had tried to stop Rachel expressed their concern for me. Yes, thank you. After that incident, it seemed someone reported Rachel to her boss, and she was reprimanded. Since then, while she'd occasionally glare at me with great intensity, her confrontations with me considerably decreased, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Days passed, and Rachel was assigned to the HR department. Why did she get assigned to HR? I wondered as peace returned to my work. Each department is important in its own right, but given Rachel's track record and personality, I simply couldn't picture her in HR. I know she had to turn in a copy of her university diploma, so I'm certain her educational background isn't a lie. But even with that thought, she couldn't even run a photocopy machine and still worked on documents in her own style, despite being corrected several times already. More importantly, her attitude towards her colleagues is awful. This was something I knew better than anyone else. I wondered how she could get by like this. Despite enduring numerous verbal abuses and harassments, I couldn't help but worry. While I was worried, I also didn't want to get involved with her anymore. I stretched out, savoring the peace that had returned. 2 months later, I was in the changing room, switching from my regular work clothes to a suit, catching my breath. Dressing differently made me feel more focused. I quickly checked my appearance in the mirror and murmured to myself, "Today there's going to be a lecture-based training session at the company, and I was one of the attendees." When I arrived at the venue, some employees were still preparing the projector and arranging the desks. I should help out since I'm already here, I thought in my mind as I approached a person on the stage. As the person turned to my voice, they expressed surprise. "Wait, Sherry, what are you doing here?" I deeply regretted my mistake in choosing who to approach. Of all people, it was Rachel, the troublemaker. She put her hands on her hips, looked down at me from the stage, and snorted. "There's a training session here today. What does an old part-timer like you need?" As always, she was unpleasant. I kept my smile and responded, "Yes, I'm here to attend the session too." Rachel snorted. "Hold on, today's the final day of training for us new hires. Why would a part-timer like you attend? Oh, I see. You're an old lady who needs to refresh her memory from time to time, so things don't slip your mind." Putting aside her sarcasm, Rachel was right. Today was indeed the final day of training for the new hires. Our company's training for new employees lasts exactly 3 months. The first month is an assessment period, and the remaining 2 are for their boss to observe their work performance. Today was the final day, a sort of summary day where several employees serving as lecturers would provide lectures on topics such as the company's management philosophy. "You're not here as a lecturer, are you? Or has dementia made you confused? This place isn't for bottom-rung workers. Go home already." As I maintained my silence and smile, Rachel's verbal onslaught escalated. The younger employees around us were so stunned that they forgot to stop her. While she was still berating me, I noticed a familiar face among those entering the room. Keeping my smile intact, I gestured with my palm toward the entrance. "You might be the one who'll be leaving after this." "What are you—" Rachel followed my palm and immediately gasped. Standing there were our company's president, the head of the HR department to which Rachel belonged, and Ethan, the man she fancied. The head of HR was sweating profusely at Rachel's outburst, while the president and Ethan were clearly disgusted. "No, this isn't what— I was just trying to explain to this part-timer the importance of today's training." Rachel, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, began to stammer out excuses. No one was coming to her aid. Amid the uncomfortable silence, Ethan, standing next to the president, glared at Rachel and asked me, "Mom, is she the problematic new hire you were always talking about?" When I answered, "Yes," Rachel let out a shriek as if her throat had been constricted. "So you're Ethan's mom? Then are you the president's wife?" Back when I was young and working for this company, I was introduced to the former president's son and ended up marrying him. My husband is now the president of this company. Not only Rachel, but also the other younger employees were displaying expressions of surprise.
"Why didn't anyone tell me?"
At Rachel's distressed outburst, I explained, "Only a few employees know I'm the president's wife. I didn't want the new employees' attitudes to be affected, so I asked them to keep quiet about it." Rachel just gaped in response to my words. I was asked by my husband to greet the new employees and offer them words of encouragement, both as a long-serving part-time employee and as the president's wife. That's why I intended to attend today. I didn't expect to be talked down to this much. Rachel bit her lip.
"Why would the president's wife work as a part-timer?"
I might not know much about running a business, but I love this company, and I enjoy working among people. Also, working part-time is easier, since I still have household chores at my age. I continued. There are things that are harder to see from higher positions that are instead clearer to a part-timer. For instance, we often hear various rumors, don't we? I glanced between the head of HR and Rachel while making my ambiguous remark. Rachel's face instantly turned red. I hadn't planned on spelling it out in this setting, but in her heightened state of emotion, Rachel pointed at the HR manager and shouted out an accusation. It was him. He told me that if I went out with him, he would arrange for me to be hired. I was taken aback, not expecting her to self-destruct in this way. Everyone, including my husband and son, was astir. Working part-time, I heard all sorts of rumors, including the rumor about our head of HR and Rachel being in a relationship even before she started working here. It was supposedly why she was hired and assigned to HR in the first place. The source was one of Rachel's fellow new hires, who also told me about it. Apparently, a drunken Rachel had boastfully revealed it all at a social gathering. Later, when I was complaining about Rachel to my husband, I also discussed this rumor with him. I intended to verify it at some point, but I didn't expect this sudden turn of events. All eyes were on the head of HR. His sweat-drenched face was so pale and trembled, so much that he looked as if he were crying. Criticism began to fly around the room. The head of HR was a married man, so it was only natural.
Given these circumstances, we have no choice but to halt the training for now,
my husband declared, and the training was put on pause. Dragging along Rachel, who was wailing, and the HR manager in a daze, we relocated to the president's office.
We had initially heard rumors about you two from my wife, Rachel, right? Your disrespectful behavior towards my wife was unacceptable, and we have received numerous complaints from other employees as well. Honestly, we were trying to figure out how to deal with this. By the way, sir, is it true what Rachel just said?
Yes. With my husband's question, the HR manager, knowing he could not escape, weakly nodded. Rachel had difficulty in landing a job despite her education, because her character was seen through. Seems as though this whole thing started after the HR manager approached her following her interview. Rachel, on the other hand, was defiant and was shouting at me.
This coward, he manipulated me into it.
She seemed to be referring to when she exposed her relationship with the HR manager, and from her demeanor, she didn't seem remorseful at all.
Your way of joining the company is far more cowardly.
Ethan defended me with those words, and Rachel sat down, breaking into tears. I approached Rachel and said, Rachel, you were allowed to join the company in exchange for engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a married HR manager. That alone is considerably wrong as a person. Be ashamed of yourself. Correct your actions. Otherwise, I believe you'll lead a life filled with more regrets than now. I spoke to her as if admonishing, but Rachel just looked down, silent like a sulking child.
Mom, I don't think it's worth saying anything to her. She's really done as a person.
Upon hearing Ethan's sighing voice, Rachel's voice subtly shivered. Oh right, she had a one-sided crush on my son. These brief words may have hit her harder than anything I said.
Now that we know it's a fact, we'll decide on your consequences later. Rachel, you can go home for today, and as for you, you stay and get back to work.
With my husband's words, the HR manager and Rachel, both staggering, left the president's office. After watching their retreating figures, I never saw Rachel again. After a while, she resigned from the company. The HR manager was demoted and transferred to a different department, and was served with divorce papers by his wife. He's clinging to his job while being looked down upon by others, all to pay alimony and child support. According to Rachel's parents, who came to apologize later, understandably, Rachel was also sued for a large amount of alimony by the former HR manager's wife. Rachel turned to her parents for help but was rejected, and now she's apparently working part-time at a gas station in her neighborhood. As for me, I have plans to dine out with my family after work tonight. Ethan wants to introduce us to his girlfriend. I wonder what kind of person she is. I grinned and went back to work, looking forward to tonight's dinner.